The sprawling, begrimed brick edifice of the District 6 precinct building, a relic from an era when civic architecture aspired to a certain stoic grandeur, had long since surrendered to the city's relentless assault of grit and indifference. Its morning shift on this particular Tuesday in late October had settled into its usual monotonous groove, a rhythm dictated by the lukewarm coffee, the endless cycle of paperwork, and the low desultory crackle of the police scanner, a soundtrack of minor miseries and mundane emergencies. Officer Miguel Mike Reyes, a man whose 15 years on the force had etched lines of weary patience around his dark, watchful eyes, was ostensibly reviewing an incident report from the previous night's drunken revelries. But his mind, lulled by the rhythmic click of Nana's keyboard across the room, was drifting towards the siren song of an early lunch. He nursed a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, the dregs tasting like bitter regret. Across the wide, cluttered squad room, Nana Washington, the precinct's veteran dispatcher and unofficial historian, was already on her third industrial-strength coffee of the morning. She squinted at the glowing green text of the overnight summary reports on her dual monitors, as if they might, through sheer force of will, spontaneously generate a headline worthy of her attention. Something more compelling than the usual litany of petty thefts, domestic disputes, and fender benders. Nana had seen it all, heard it all, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to predict the day's likely trajectory based on the nocturnal anxieties of the city. Up front in the glass-walled office that afforded him a panoramic, if somewhat judgmental view of his domain, Chief Frank Monroe, a man whose thinning gray hair and perpetually furrowed brow spoke of battles fought both on the streets and within the labyrinthine bureaucracy of the department, was forcefully scribbling on the large whiteboard. His notes concerned the intricate, headache-inducing patrol coverage required for some upcoming Founders Day parade, an event that annually stretched the precinct's resources and frayed its collective nerves. The squeak of his marker was an irritating counterpoint to the scanner's drone. "Reyes!" Monroe called out, his voice a gravelly bark that carried easily across the room, without even deigning to turn around from his whiteboard machinations. That detailed incident report from last night's little soiree down at O'Malley's. The one involving the intoxicated gentleman, the fire hydrant, and the somewhat ambitious karaoke rendition of My Way. You planning on actually finishing it sometime before you draw your pension, or what? Reyes managed a wan grin, the kind reserved for long-suffering subordinates dealing with predictably irascible superiors. By lunch, Chief Scout's honor, just wrestling with the precise legal terminology for public indecency involving a traffic control device. A low chuckle rippled through the nearby desks. Outside, the persistent drizzling rain that had plagued the city for 3 straight days had finally reluctantly let up, leaving behind a world washed in shades of gray. The streets glistened under a watery, reluctant sun, and the air, when the heavy lobby door occasionally creaked open, carried the familiar, oddly comforting smell of wet concrete, decaying autumn leaves, and vehicle exhaust. The city's unique, gritty perfume. Just another Tuesday. Another unremarkable morning unfolding with predictable, almost soporific slowness. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, that familiar olfactory landscape began to change. It started as a subtle, unwelcome undercurrent, the kind of faint, unpleasant aroma that might make one idly wonder if someone had forgotten their tuna sandwich in a desk drawer over the long weekend. But it didn't dissipate. Instead, it grew steadily, insistently, becoming stronger, sharper, more invasive. It was a complex, deeply unsettling smell, a fetid cocktail of something metallic, something organic, something profoundly, primordially rotten that made the hairs on the back of your neck prickle and your stomach churn with a sudden queasy lurch. Nana, ever sensitive to the subtle shifts in the precinct's atmosphere, wrinkled her perfectly sculpted nose. Anybody else getting that smells like something crawled in here and died? Reyes took a cautious, shallow sniff and immediately profoundly regretted it. Yeah, Christ, Nana, what is that? Smells like a slaughterhouse drain. Monroe spun around from his whiteboard, his face already creased with annoyance. His patience, always a finite resource, clearly nearing its daily depletion. For God's sake, did somebody forget their damn lunch in a drawer again? This is a police station, not a biohazard disposal unit. Thompson checked the lost and found maybe an old gym bag. But then the heavy oak lobby doors, the ones usually opened with a sigh of institutional reluctance, swung inward with a slow, deliberate groan, and every single person in the squad room, every cop, every civilian clerk, every half-awake detective just stopped. Dead. There, framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the weak gray morning light, stood the sorriest-looking, most wretched creature any of them had ever laid eyes upon. It was a dog, or what was left of one. Mud, thick and black, caked its once tawny fur, matting it into grotesque pointed clumps. Its prominent ribs, starkly visible beneath the patchy, diseased-looking hide, spoke of prolonged starvation. Its paws were bloody, its gait a painful, hesitant limp, and its eyes, dull, haunted amber orbs that seemed to carry the weary ancient wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes of suffering, regarded them with a strange, unnerving stillness. But it wasn't the dog's pitiable, abject condition that seized their collective attention, that froze the breath in their lungs. It was what was hanging with a grim, unnatural tenacity from its powerful, bloody jaws. A black industrial-grade plastic trash bag knotted tightly at the top, its surface slick with some unidentifiable viscous fluid, was dripping a slow, steady, dark puddle onto the precinct's recently polished linoleum floor. The bag swung with a sickening pendulum-like rhythm with each ragged, shallow breath the dog took. What in the ever-loving? Reyes started, his voice a hoarse whisper, as he slowly, instinctively rose from his chair, his hand unconsciously drifting towards the comforting, familiar weight of his service weapon. The appalling smell, now identifiable, now overwhelming, intensified tenfold, flooding the room with its noisome, stomach-turning presence. Nena actually gagged her hand, flying to cover her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of disgust and dawning horrified comprehension. The dog, ignoring the sudden shock silence, the palpable wave of human revulsion, just walked right in, with a strange, uncanine, almost regal calm, as if it owned the damn place. It limped deliberately, purposefully to the precise geometric center of the squad room, and then with a weary, almost sighing exhalation, sat down, its gaze fixed on Chief Monroe, still holding that grotesque, dripping bag with an iron, unwavering grip. Monroe's face, normally a ruddy landscape of controlled irritation, went a dangerous, apoplectic shade of crimson. What the hell is this? Who in God's name let this flea-bitten walking biohazard in here? His voice was a strangled roar. Nobody answered. They were all too busy staring, transfixed by a gruesome fascination at the dog, at the bag, at the rapidly expanding, viscid puddle of unidentifiable filth forming beneath it on the once gleaming floor. "Reyes Torres, get that thing out of my station!" Monroe barked, his voice cracking with a mixture of fury and barely suppressed nausea. "Now, before I'm forced to take care of it myself permanently." But the dog, the mangy, pathetic creature, didn't even flinch at the chief's enraged bellow. It just sat there, its dull amber eyes holding Monroe's furious gaze with an unnerving, almost challenging intensity. Reyes approached slowly, cautiously, one hand extended, palm open, trying to project an aura of calm, non-threatening friendliness he was very far from feeling. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "You can't be in here, pal. This isn't the place for you. Come on now, let's go outside, get you some fresh air, maybe some water." The growl that rumbled out of that dog's chest was not the sound of a frightened, cornered stray. It was deep, guttural, resonant, with a primal, unwavering warning. It was the sound of a creature pushed beyond its limits, a creature with nothing left to lose, a creature defending something of unimaginable importance. Reyes froze mid-step, his outstretched hand dropping to his side. "Okay," he said softly, more to himself than to the dog. "Not friendly, definitely not friendly." "I said get it out." Monroe was truly losing his already frayed composure, now his voice escalating to a near-hysterical shriek. "This is a United States police station, not a goddamn city pound, not a canine hospice. I want it gone." Sure, Officer Maria Torres Reyes's younger, more athletic partner joined him, then her expression a mixture of apprehension and professional resolve. They began to slowly, cautiously circle the dog, trying to find an angle of approach, a way to dislodge it without provoking an attack. But every time they got within a few feet, every time they made a move that could be interpreted as threatening, the growling intensified, the dog's lips curling back to reveal a surprisingly formidable set of stained yellow teeth. This wasn't a scared, lost dog looking for a handout or a moment's shelter. This dog was protecting something. Not itself, Reyes realized with a sudden cold certainty. That bag. It was all about that damn dripping bag. "All right, that's it. I've had enough of this circus." Monroe muttered, his patience completely exhausted. His hand moved decisively, ominously towards the snap of his holster. "You miserable cur, you've got exactly 5 seconds to vacate these premises before this ends very badly for you." But the dog still didn't move, not an inch. It didn't cower, didn't snarl, didn't even blink. It just held its ground, a small, wretched, indomitable sentinel. The entire atmosphere in the room had shifted, charged with an almost electric, unbearable tension. Everybody could sense it, from the newest rookie to the most jaded veteran. This wasn't just some random, unfortunate stray dog looking for food or a warm place to escape the lingering morning chill. Something was terribly, profoundly, unequivocally wrong here. And it all somehow came down to whatever horrors lay concealed within that filthy, dripping, black plastic trash bag. None of them knew it yet, not consciously, but their boring, predictable Tuesday morning was about to violently, irrevocably become anything but. The tension in the squad room was now so thick, so palpable, it felt as if you could carve it into chunks with a rusty knife. Chief Monroe's voice, when he finally spoke again, cracked like a whip in the suddenly oppressive silence. "If you two highly trained, supposedly competent police officers can't handle one single mangy, half-dead dog, then maybe you're in the wrong damn line of work." His glare was venomous. Torres winced visibly at the chief's biting sarcasm. "Chief, with all due respect, it's acting extremely defensive. If we spook it further, try to force the issue, things could get very ugly very fast. For us and for the dog." "I don't care if it's the bloody mayor's prize-winning poodle, Torres." Monroe spat, his face mottled with rage. "I want it out of my station now." He stomped forward, his hand still resting ominously on the butt of his holstered weapon, his knuckles white. The dog, sensing the escalation, the direct threat, let out a sharp, explosive snarl, a sound so ferocious, so filled with desperate intent that it made even the most seasoned veterans in the room take an involuntary step back. Its entire emaciated body tensed, every muscle coiled like a rusty spring. It could clearly sense the imminent danger, not just to itself, but more importantly, to whatever precious, terrible cargo it guarded so fiercely. It actually pulled the sodden, reeking trash sack closer with one filthy, trembling paw, its teeth still locked with grim, unwavering tenacity on the knotted plastic. "This is utterly ridiculous," Monroe muttered, though a flicker of uncertainty now touched his eyes. "It's protecting a bag of garbage as if it were the damn crown jewels." The bizarre, unnerving standoff was now drawing a considerable crowd. Officers who had been engrossed in paperwork or sipping coffee in the break room or idly checking their social media feeds were now standing around the periphery of the squad room, their faces a mixture of curiosity, amusement, and a growing, creeping unease. They watched this strange, unprecedented drama play out with a morbid fascination. But there was something about this particular dog's eyes, Reyes noted again. They weren't darting around in wild, unfocused panic, as one would expect from most frightened, cornered strays. They were locked with an unwavering, intelligent, almost human intensity on Chief Monroe, steady, resolute, and utterly, chillingly determined. Reyes, sensing a disastrous escalation was imminent, tried a different tack. "Chief, just let me try something else. Please." Drawing weapons, especially in here with so many people around, it might just make this whole situation a hell of a lot worse. Monroe glared at him, his jaw tight, but after a long charged moment, he gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod of reluctant assent. Reyes crouched down slowly, painstakingly, slowly keeping his movements small, deliberate, non-threatening. He kept his voice soft, low, almost a caress. "Hey there, pal," he murmured, trying to project a calm he was far from feeling. "You look absolutely beat. Must have had a long, rough night, huh?" He fumbled in his jacket pocket, pulled out a slightly crushed granola bar, his emergency rations, and after carefully unwrapping it, tossed it gently underhand toward the dog. The dog didn't even glance at the unexpected offering of food. Its attention remained resolutely, unnervingly fixed on Monroe. Instead, it let out another strange, low guttural growl, a sound that wasn't overtly threatening this time, but rather insistent, urgent, almost pleading, as if it were desperately trying to communicate something vital, something they weren't understanding. Then it did the weirdest, most unexpected thing. It looked directly, pointedly at Chief Monroe, then slowly, deliberately lowered its gaze to the filthy, dripping bag at its paws, then raised its eyes again to meet Monroe's. The sequence was repeated, once, twice. Monroe blinked, a flicker of stunned surprise, then grudging comprehension dawning on his angry face. Is it trying to show us something? Is that even possible? I think it wants us to look inside that bag." "Chief," Reyes said quietly, a sudden, inexplicable shiver tracing a cold path down his spine. This was no ordinary stray. Monroe, however, wasn't buying it. Not yet. "Oh, for crying out loud, Reyes. It's a half-starved, diseased stray with a bag of stinking trash. You're acting like it's goddamn Lassie trying to tell us Timmy's fallen down the well again." He gestured impatiently at Torres. "Torres, enough of this sentimental nonsense. Grab the bag. Now." Torres moved in again, reluctantly, her hand reaching tentatively, cautiously for the knotted top of the plastic bag. The dog sprang up instantly, a blur of matted fur and desperate ferocity, positioning its frail body protectively between Torres and the precious, reeking bag. It let out a single, sharp, explosive bark, a sound that echoed off the drab institutional walls with shocking, undeniable authority. Torres backed off immediately, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Okay, buddy, take it easy. I'm not going to touch it." Honorably, Nina, who had been observing the entire bizarre encounter with a preternatural, almost unnerving calm from her dispatcher's console, stepped closer, then her voice careful, measured, thoughtful. "Wait a minute, Chief. Everybody just look at it. Really look at it. The dog doesn't want food. It's clearly not interested in finding a warm place to sleep. It wants us, it needs us, to see what's inside that specific bag. It's trying to tell us something important. Or it's just plain crazy rabid even." Monroe snapped, though his conviction was visibly wavering now, a seed of doubt planted by the dog's inexplicable, unwavering intelligence. But then, as if it understood every single word they were saying, as if it were responding directly to Nina's insightful assessment, the dog slowly, deliberately lowered its noble, mud-caked head. It set the heavy, dripping bag down gently, almost reverently, on the linoleum floor. And then, with a surprising, almost shocking delicacy, it began to paw at the knotted top of the bag, carefully, methodically, its broken, dirty claws, tearing with focused precision at the stretched, greasy plastic of the main seam. "Don't let it do that, for God's sake!" Monroe shouted, his voice tinged with a new note of genuine alarm. "It's going to spread that god-awful garbage, whatever it is, all over my damn precinct." It was too late. With one final determined tug of its powerful jaws, the black plastic bag split open with a sickening tearing sound. And the smell, the god-awful, soul-chilling smell, hit them with the brutal, concussive force of a physical punch to the gut. Sour, metallic, rotten, utterly, horrifically, unmistakably wrong. "Oh, sweet Jesus!" Nana choked out her hand, flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning visceral horror, as she stumbled backwards away from the rapidly intensifying stench. Something pale, something obscenely out of place, tumbled with a soft, wet thud out of the gaping tear in the bag. Something smooth, something articulated, something that was most definitely, unequivocally not garbage. A human hand, severed cleanly at the wrist. The entire bustling squad room went dead preternaturally silent. The only sound was the frantic, ragged gasping of Nina and the low, almost inaudible whimpering of the dog. "What the?" Monroe stepped back, his face draining of all color, his eyes staring transfixed at the grotesque object on his floor. Is that what I think it is?" Reyes, his own stomach churning, his mind reeling, moved closer, drawn by a horrifying professional compulsion. He crouched slowly, reluctantly beside the torn, reeking bag. The hand was a ghastly, mottled, grayish-white, stiff, waxy, its fingernails surprisingly clean, almost manicured. It was already starting to show the early telltale signs of decomposition. There was no question, no doubt what it was. "Yeah, Chief," he said grimly, his voice a hoarse, barely audible whisper. "It is. We've got a body, or at least part of one." Monroe's entire attitude, his entire demeanor transformed in that single horrifying heartbeat. The anger, the frustration, the petty irritations, they vanished instantly, completely replaced by a cold, hard professional focus. The ingrained response of a veteran cop facing the unthinkable. "Lock it down!" He ordered, his voice sharp, decisive, cutting through the stunned, shocked silence. "Secure the scene, now, nobody in, nobody out. Torres, get on the horn to forensics, tell them we have a suspected homicide dismemberment. Need a full team here, lights and sirens. Reyes, get that damn yellow tape up across the lobby entrance. And somebody, for the love of God, call animal control. Get this heroic mutt out of here." Reyes hesitated, his gaze shifting from the gruesome hand to the dog, which now sat quietly, almost patiently beside the spilled, horrific remains, its amber eyes fixed on him with a strange, expectant intensity. "Hold off on that animal control call for a minute, Chief." Monroe's eyes narrowed, his expression incredulous. "Why in God's name would we do that, Reyes?" Reyes nodded slowly towards the dog, a sudden, powerful, inexplicable intuition taking root in his mind. "Because, Chief, because I don't think he's done showing us stuff. I think this is just the beginning." Within minutes, the normally bustling, chaotic lobby of District 6 was sealed off, transformed into a sterile, silent crime scene. Strands of flat, lurid yellow crime scene tape stark against the drab, institutional green of the walls, crisscrossed the main entrance, barring entry. Uniformed officers, their faces grim, were stationed at every access point, efficiently rerouting bewildered civilians and off-duty personnel through a rarely used back entrance near the overflowing dumpsters. The forensics team summoned with urgent priority arrived with impressive speed, their movements practiced, economical, their faces impassive masks of professional detachment. Gloved hands were already meticulously dusting the torn black plastic bag for latent prints, their cameras flashing with cold clinical precision as they documented the awful severed hand from every conceivable angle. The pervasive, sickeningly sweet, cloying smell of decomposition was everywhere now, a phantom that clung to the air, seeming to soak into the very walls, the fabric of their uniforms, even with the gruesome remains now carefully triple-bagged and sealed in an evidence container. But nobody, not a single officer, could stop looking at the dog. It just sat there as calm and composed as if it were waiting patiently for its owner outside a corner store. Its amber eyes methodically watching each officer, each forensic technician, each subtle movement as if it were indeed waiting for something specific, something more. "We need to establish a secure perimeter around the initial find location if possible." The lead forensics investigator, a brisk, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Albright, announced, her voice sharp and authoritative. "We need prints, fibers, soil samples, DNA swabs, anything and everything that can tell us where this package originated. The sooner we can pinpoint that, the better our chances of identifying the victim and hopefully the perpetrator. That kind of detailed trace analysis could take days, weeks even." Reyes muttered, his gaze still fixed on the dog, which had now risen slowly to its paws and was sniffing intently at the spot where the hand had lain. "And I've got a strange, powerful hunch that this guy," he gestured towards the dog, "already knows exactly where it came from. He's not just a finder, he's a guide." Chief Monroe stared at the animal, his jaw tight with a mixture of residual skepticism and a dawning grudging respect. "You seriously want to put the integrity of a homicide investigation, potentially a very high-profile one, in the paws of a stray dog? Reyes, you want us to follow this mutt around the city like it's some kind of canine GPS?" Reyes didn't blink, didn't waver. His belief in the dog's uncanny intelligence, its inexplicable purposefulness, was solidifying with every passing moment. "Chief, I think he brought us this evidence for a very specific reason. He risked a lot to get it here. I say we let him lead us. We might just find the rest of the victim. We might find the primary crime scene." The squad room, or what was left of it outside the taped-off area, held its collective breath. The silence was broken only by the whir and click of forensic cameras. "Chief," Nina said gently, her voice barely above a whisper, though her eyes were bright with conviction. "If that hand did indeed come from somewhere nearby, somewhere in our district, and this dog against all odds managed to find it and bring it directly here, then he might just be our best, perhaps our only immediate shot at cracking this case wide open before the trail goes completely cold." Monroe crossed his thick arms over his chest, his expression a mask of conflicted emotions. He was a man who believed in procedure and protocol, in hard evidence, not in hunches or, God forbid, in the supposed psychic abilities of stray animals. "One wrong turn, Reyes," he growled, "one wild goose chase after this mangy flea bag, and we're out here chasing squirrels and rummaging through garbage cans, while the real killer, the real trail, evaporates into thin air. This city eats evidence for breakfast." Reyes, ignoring the chief's dire prediction, knelt down again, slowly, deliberately bringing himself to the dog's eye level. He spoke softly, his voice filled with a respect that was entirely genuine. "Okay, boy, you did good. You brought us this far. You got anything else you want to show us? Anywhere else you need us to go?" The dog's intelligent ears perked up instantly at the gentle, questioning tone in Reyes's voice. It stood slowly with a surprising dignity for such a wretched creature, gave the evidence bag containing the severed hand one last lingering look, then padded with quiet, determined purpose towards the main lobby door, the one now crisscrossed with yellow tape. It stopped there at the very edge of the crime scene and looked back over its bony shoulder, its amber eyes meeting Reyes's, holding his gaze with an expression of clear, undeniable expectation. "Open it, Torres," Reyes said, his voice firm, certain. "Let him out." Chief Monroe, after a moment of intense internal debate, his face a thundercloud of conflicting emotions, finally grudgingly nodded his assent. Torres carefully lifted a section of the crime scene tape, and the heavy oak door swung open with a protesting groan. The dog stepped out without hesitation into the lingering drizzle in the gray, indifferent city beyond. Officers, alerted by Reyes, scrambled to grab rain gear, their movements urgent, a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation now palpable in the air. Reyes, improvising, quickly fashioned a makeshift leash from a length of discarded evidence rope he found in a supply closet, looping it through the metal ring of a heavy-duty evidence bag clip, and then, with surprising gentleness, slipped the loop carefully around the dog's scrawny, matted neck. The dog offered no resistance, no protest, merely a slight, almost imperceptible dip of its head, as if in acknowledgement or acceptance. "All right, damn it," Monroe grumbled, pulling the hood of his raincoat up over his thinning hair his face a mask of weary resignation. "But you heard me, Reyes. Everybody keep spread out. Maintain visual contact. Stay alert. Radio discipline. And if this mutt leads us on some pointless scavenger hunt to a dumpster full of last week's pizza boxes and Chinese takeout, I swear to God, you're all getting written up for dereliction of duty. And Reyes, you'll be on desk duty until Christmas." But it didn't happen that way, not even close. The dog, now tentatively named John Doe by Nina over the radio net, led them with an uncanny, unwavering sense of purpose through a bewildering labyrinth of narrow garbage-strewn back alleys, down a dimly lit service lane, fragrant with the smell of stale cooking oil and overflowing bins across a small forgotten city park, its swings creaking mournfully in the damp breeze. It only stopped once briefly to sniff intently at the base of a rusting lamppost, its tail giving a single, almost imperceptible twitch, then continued onward with an even greater, more urgent sense of focused determination. These weren't the random, aimless wanderings of a lost or scavenging animal. This dog knew exactly where it was going. It moved with the quiet, focused confidence of a seasoned tracker. "He's not lost, not just wandering." Nina observed, her voice a low murmur in Reyes's earpiece. She was bringing up the rear, her departmental issue camera held ready, documenting their strange, unprecedented procession. "He's definitely following something. A scent trail, maybe. A strong one." Shiki. After another 10 minutes of increasingly tense, silent progress, a journey that took them deeper into a blighted, forgotten industrial wasteland, on the very edge of their precinct, the dog turned sharply without hesitation onto a rutted, unpaved industrial access road. The road was lined with a depressing phalanx of huge, dented, overflowing commercial dumpsters and the decaying, boarded-up loading docks of long-abandoned factories. The entire area reeked of neglect, despair, and the faint metallic tang of industrial decay. It was a place the city had forgotten, a place where its refuse, both literal and metaphorical, was left to fester. This area had been on their radar before peripherally. Occasional complaints about illegal dumping, reports of vagrants seeking shelter in the derelict buildings. But nothing overtly serious, nothing that would warrant a sustained police presence had ever come of it. Until now. The dog stopped abruptly, its body tensing behind a once grand, now crumbling, red brick structure that had, according to a faded peeling sign, once been the Golden Crust Bakery. A single massive, rust-eaten metal dumpster sat there tucked away in the shadows, its lid slightly invitingly ajar. Rainwater slicked with a rainbow sheen of oil pooled around its dented base. The dog sniffed once, twice at the base of the dumpster, its entire body quivering with a strange, contained excitement. Then it barked, one single sharp, authoritative bark that cut through the damp, heavy air like a gunshot. Reyes stepped up cautiously, his heavy-duty flashlight already in his hand, its powerful beam cutting a bright swathe through the gloomy, rain-swept shadows. "Let's see what we got here, partner." He and Torres, their faces grim, exchanged a silent, knowing glance, then grabbed the heavy, rusted metal lid of the dumpster and, with a concerted grunting, wrenched it open. Inside, nestled amongst a scattering of sodden cardboard boxes and decaying food waste, were more black plastic trash bags. 6 of them, identical to the one the dog had brought to the station. Chief Monroe, breathless and scowling, caught up to them just as Reyes, his heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against his ribs, tore open the nearest bag. More human remains. A severed arm, slender, pale, a delicate silver bracelet, still glinting incongruously on its wrist. Part of a human torso, the flesh a ghastly, mottled bluish gray. A tangled mass of dark, matted hair, caked with dried blood, clinging with obscene tenacity to a section of decaying human skin. The smell, even in the open, rain-washed air, was overwhelming, a physical assault on the senses. "Sweet Jesus Christ!" Torres whispered, his voice choked, as he staggered back a step, his face pale and beaded with sweat. This isn't random. This isn't some gang hit." "No," Reyes said quietly, his own voice barely a croak, his stomach roiling. This is deliberate, methodical. Someone cut her up, distributed the pieces, trying to slow down identification to buy themselves time. They checked each bag their movements, now slow heavy their faces masks of grim professional horror. Each one held human remains dismembered with a chilling, almost surgical precision, and then callously, brutally scattered, like so much refuse to delay discovery, to confound investigation. The dog, their silent, enigmatic guide, stood patiently in the steady drizzling rain, the water dripping unheeded from its matted fur, from the tip of its twitching black nose, its ancient amber eyes watching them intently as they uncovered the terrible, gruesome truth. It already knew the truth. It had so desperately, so courageously tried to bring to their attention. "Get forensics here now." Monroe ordered, his voice hoarse, all his earlier skepticism, his anger completely gone, replaced by a cold, hard, righteous fury. "And somebody, for God's sake, get this damned heroic dog out of the rain. He's earned it." He looked directly at Reyes, a new profound respect dawning in his tired eyes. "Take him back to the precinct, Reyes. Get him some food. Clean him up as best you can. Find him somewhere warm, somewhere dry to rest." "Why?" Reyes reached out his hand, trembling slightly, and placed it gently on the dog's wet, shivering back. "You did, good partner," he said softly, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "You did real good." Back at the District 6 station, the entire atmosphere, the very air itself, felt different. Change. Charged. Nobody looked at the dog, their unlikely, four-legged informant, like a dangerous pest, a walking biohazard anymore. Officers who just a few short hours earlier had been complaining loudly about fleas and demanding its immediate removal, now stepped aside respectfully, almost reverently, as Reyes led the limping, exhausted animal through the back entrance and into the relative warmth and dry of the squad room. Nenia, her usual cynical demeanor softened by a profound, almost maternal concern, immediately grabbed a clean, fluffy towel from the emergency supply locker and began to gently, carefully dry the dog off her touch, as tender as a mother with a sick, beloved child. "Got a name for him yet, Mike?" she asked softly, her voice filled with a warmth Reyes hadn't heard from her in years. "Not yet, Nana." Reyes said, his gaze fixed on the dog, which was now wolfing down a bowl of premium dog food, hastily procured from a nearby pet store by a shamefaced rookie, as if it hadn't eaten a proper meal in weeks, perhaps months. But after today, after what he's done, he's definitely earned one. A good one. They improvised a comfortable bed for him in a quiet, out-of-the-way corner of the bustling squad room, using a pile of old evidence blankets that were due to be incinerated. The dog, after finishing every last scrap of food in the bowl, curled up immediately on the soft blankets, its weary body finally succumbing to exhaustion. But it didn't fully close its eyes, Reyes noted. It remained watchful, alert, its amber gaze still scanning the room, still assessing, still waiting. Meanwhile, Chief Monroe, his face a grim, determined mask, stood before the large, grease-stained evidence board in the main briefing room, pinning up the first horrifying set of glossy crime scene photos from the dumpster behind the abandoned bakery. "No ID on the victim yet, no purse, no personal effects, nothing to give us a starting point," he announced to the assembled detectives. "Female victim, Caucasian, approximate age, mid-30s, maybe early 40s, dark hair. We'll run dental records if we can get them, check missing persons reports going back at least a month, see if we get any hits." Nina, her laptop, opened, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed, came over to stand beside him. Preliminary visual examination of the remains by Dr. Albright at the scene suggests the dismemberment was carried out with professional-grade tools, possibly specialized hunting or butchering equipment. The cuts are clean, precise. Whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. Monroe rubbed his throbbing temples, a gesture of deep weariness and mounting frustration. This wasn't their first time then, not by a long shot. Then, just as the weight of the seemingly insurmountable task ahead began to settle heavily upon them, the forensics lab called with a preliminary tentative match. A missing person report filed just 5 days earlier by a frantic, distraught sister. Kayla Ann Dempsey, 36, a registered nurse at the nearby Pine Hill Medical Center, a well-respected, dedicated professional. She was last seen leaving the hospital after a long double shift just 5 days ago. Her last known location, her apartment, was a mere 2 city blocks from where the dog had first inexplicably shown up at the precinct, dragging its grisly burden. He must have found the hand while he was scavenging for food in that area. Reyes said, his voice hushed, looking over at the now softly snoring dog, a profound sense of awe and a deep, unsettling mystery filling him. But instead of eating it or just leaving it there, he brought it here, to us. That's the part I still don't get, Monroe muttered, shaking his head, his expression a mixture of bafflement and grudging admiration. Why here? Why come directly to a police station? He's had no apparent training, no handler, no prior connection to law enforcement. He just knew. Reyes had no answer. None of them did. But somehow, against all odds, against all logic, this forgotten, nameless, mangy stray dog had picked the right building at the right time, had endured their fear, their anger, their threats, and had stubbornly, courageously refused to leave until anybody finally listened to what he was so desperately trying to tell them. Hours later, the full autopsy report from the city morgue painted an even uglier, more disturbing picture of Kayla Dempsey's final terrifying hours. Ligature marks on her wrists and ankles, extensive bruising consistent with a violent struggle, signs of prolonged restraint. She had been held captive somewhere for some time before being brutally murdered, then meticulously, almost clinically dismembered and callously dumped. I want every single CCTV camera, public and private, between Pine Hill Medical Center and that alleyway behind the bakery, checked and double-checked. Monroe ordered, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Somebody somewhere must have seen something. Somebody transported her alive or dead. Somebody dumped those bags. I want to know who. I want to know how. Torres and a team of uniforms came back late that night from an exhaustive door-to-door canvass of the businesses and residences in the vicinity of the bakery. They had nothing new, no fresh leads, no eyewitnesses. The killer, it seemed, was a ghost. But one thing was becoming terrifyingly, undeniably clear: the dog, their silent, four-legged witness, had beaten them to every single crucial clue so far. They were playing catch-up, a desperate, frustrating game to a stray animal with no badge, no voice, and no official standing. Nina, her face etched with fatigue, but her eyes bright with a fierce, protective determination, sat down next to Reyes in the deserted, dimly lit break room, a cup of lukewarm coffee in her hand. You think he had an owner once, Mike, before all this? Reyes nodded slowly, his gaze distant, thoughtful. He's too smart, too focused, too knowing not to have. Maybe abandoned when he got old or sick, maybe lost somehow. But he still thinks like somebody's partner. He still acts like he has a purpose. Chief Monroe, looking even more exhausted than Reyes felt, poked his head into the break room. Animal control just called again. They're asking if we're planning on officially keeping him or if we're handing him over to them for assessment and probable euthanasia in the morning. They're swamped, they said. No room at the inn for another aggressive, unadoptable stray. The room went utterly, completely quiet. Reyes looked at Nina. Nina looked at Reyes. Even Monroe seemed to be holding his breath. I'll fill out the necessary adoption paperwork myself. Chief, Reyes said finally, his voice quiet, but firm, the decision made in his heart long before his lips formed the words. He stays with us. He's earned that much. Monroe raised a weary eyebrow, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded. Then for God's sake, Reyes, give him a proper name. We can't keep filing official departmental reports referring to him as that dog or John Doe K9 forever. It's undignified. A low-shared chuckle, the first genuine moment of levity they'd had all day, rippled through the small, tired group. The dog, asleep on his makeshift bed in the corner, stirred at the sound of Reyes's voice, lifting his matted head slightly, his amber eyes blinking slowly in the dim light. "Welcome to the team partner," Reyes said softly, a new unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. "Welcome to the madhouse." He hadn't decided on a name yet, but he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that this dog, this extraordinary, enigmatic creature, was now a part of his life, a part of their precinct, for better or for worse. The pale morning sun, struggling to penetrate the grimy blinds of the squad room, filtered weakly through the accumulated layers of dust and neglect as the newly and somewhat unceremoniously christened Shadow stood patiently by the main door, his tail executing a single, hesitant, almost tentative wag. His once filthy, matted coat was now passably clean, thanks to a midnight scrubbing in the station's utility sink by Reyes and a reluctant Torres. It had been trimmed up just enough by Nena using a pair of borrowed barber's shears to lose the worst of the street grime and reveal the surprisingly noble contours of his head and the lean, powerful musculature beneath his emaciated frame. He still looked rough around the edges, a patchwork of old scars and new anxieties. But there was a new light, a spark of something akin to hope in his ancient amber eyes. The station was buzzing with a renewed grim energy. Kayla Dempsey's brutal murder and the horrifying implications of a potential serial killer operating within their city had everyone on edge, their professional instincts honed to a razor sharpness. Reyes, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, clipped Shadow's new department-issue collar. Plain, durable, black nylon, with a simple silver stamp tag reading merely, "Shadow, D6K9 Unit Provisional," round the dog's surprisingly thick neck. "Ready to get back to work, partner?" he asked, his voice still carrying a note of incredulity at the events of the past 24 hours. Shadow didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't offer any overt canine acknowledgement. He just turned with that same quiet, unnerving purposefulness and walked out of the squad room, heading towards the rear exit that led to the precinct's parking lot, as if he knew exactly what they were doing, where they were going next. Chief Monroe, after a sleepless night spent reviewing the Dempsey case files and wrestling with his own deeply ingrained skepticism, had reluctantly but officially okayed the unprecedented field operation Reyes and Torres were to take Shadow back to the industrial area, back to the vicinity of the abandoned bakery and the primary dump site. The long-shot, almost desperate hope was that the dog, having already led them so unerringly to the victim's scattered remains, might now be able to lead them further, perhaps even to the secondary crime scene, the place where Kayla Dempsey had been held, tortured, and ultimately killed. Nena, armed with her departmental camera and a notepad, was to accompany them to document every step, every reaction, every potential piece of new evidence. Shadow moved with that same quiet, unwavering purpose they had witnessed the day before. His sensitive black nose held low to the damp ground, his entire being focused, concentrated. He stopped occasionally, his head raised, testing the morning air, his nostrils flaring before decisively, confidently changing direction. This time, however, he bypassed the abandoned bakery and the now heavily secured dumpster area, completely his attention, clearly fixed on a new, more compelling scent. He led them with an almost eerie certainty towards a sprawling, dilapidated self-storage facility that stood adjacent to the bakery. A grim, forgotten complex of rusted metal shutters, crumbling concrete, and an overwhelming aura of neglect and decay. Behind the main storage building, half hidden by a tangle of overgrown weeds and discarded refuse, was a dilapidated chain-link fence, its integrity compromised in several places, sections of it covered with torn, flapping pieces of faded blue tarpaulin. Shadow, without hesitation, squeezed his lean body through a narrow, recently created gap in the rusted wire mesh, a low, almost inaudible growl rumbling deep in his chest. Beyond the breached fence lay an even more desolate, overgrown lot, its muddy ground deeply rutted with the distinct recent tracks of heavy tires. At the far shadowed end of this forgotten patch of urban wasteland, almost completely obscured by a dense thicket of invasive sumac and wild brambles, stood a small, falling down wooden shack. Its walls were constructed of rotting, unpainted planks. Its roof partially collapsed, its windows boarded up with mismatched pieces of scavenged plywood. It was a place utterly forgotten by the city by time itself. Yet Reyes noted with a growing sense of unease there were subtle, almost invisible signs of recent clandestine use. Freshly broken branches, a faintly discernible path, trodden through the weeds, a single discarded energy drink can near the shack's sagging doorway. Shadow stopped abruptly at that dilapidated doorway, his body quivering, his nose working frantically, sniffing at the base of the rotting wood. "Got something, partner," Reyes called back softly to Torres, and Nena, his hand instinctively resting on the butt of his holstered weapon. The air here felt different, colder, heavier, charged with a silent, unseen malevolence. Inside the one-room shack, the air was thick, cloying, almost unbreathable, heavy with that same sickeningly sweet, coppery smell of stale blood and decomposition they had encountered at the dumpster. But magnified here, concentrated, almost overwhelming. A large, dirty, dark green tarpaulin lay bunched as if hastily discarded in one shadowed corner. Nearby, a set of heavy rusted iron chains of the kind used for securing industrial equipment were bolted firmly, ominously to a thick, load-bearing wooden support beam. Scattered on the filthy, dirt-packed floor were the chilling detritus of unimaginable horror. Several lengths of used duct tape, a handful of discarded plastic zip ties, an empty crumpled box of disposable latex gloves, a cheap serrated hunting knife, its blade stained dark. Torres's face, pale and beaded with sweat, stepped back out into the relative freshness of the morning air to radio in their gruesome discovery. "Dispatch, this is Unit 214. We have located a probable secondary crime scene. Potential homicide location. Request immediate forensic backup. This is where he kept her. This is where he did it." Shadow, ignoring the human activity, sniffed intently at the base of the thick wooden beam where the chains were anchored, then paced with a strange, anxious energy, circling the bundled tarpaulin with a low, mournful whine. He pressed his wet nose twice against a dark, suspicious stain on the rotting wooden floorboards, a stain that Reyes knew with a cold, sinking certainty was human blood. "Nobody's been back here since he dumped her," Reyes said grimly, his voice a hoarse whisper, his eyes taking in the horrifying tableau. "He killed her here in this hellhole. Then he cut her up, bagged the pieces, and dumped them like so much garbage." They expanded their search of the immediate area, their movements now slow, methodical, their senses hyper-alert. They found several distinct, well-defined boot prints, large size 12 with a distinctive waffle-patterned sole, leading away from the back of the shack towards a narrow, weed-choked drainage canal that ran along the edge of the overgrown lot. Reyes carefully photographed the prints, while Nena meticulously marked each one with a small, bright orange evidence flag. Suddenly, Shadow, who had been patiently observing their painstaking work, perked up his head. Snapping around his ears, erect, his body instantly alert. A new scent. A fresh trail. He took off abruptly without warning, moving with surprising speed along the muddy bank of the drainage canal, stopping suddenly triumphantly at a small, carelessly discarded pile of what appeared to be recently worn men's clothing, half hidden beneath a clump of thorny bushes. Reyes, his heart pounding carefully, using his gloved hands, picked up a dark hooded sweatshirt from the top of the pile. It was damp, muddy, and smelled faintly of bleach. In the deep front pocket, his searching fingers encountered a small, hard rectangular object, a plastic keycard, the kind used for accessing self-storage units. It bore the faded logo of Capital City Lockers, a facility located, Reyes knew from his patrol routes, approximately 2 city blocks to the east in an even more derelict, forgotten part of the industrial district. Their next stop. This dog wasn't just a guide, he was a detective. The harsh, unforgiving afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the grim utilitarian facade of Capital City Lockers, a rundown, sprawling self-storage facility wedged unceremoniously between a greasy, bustling auto repair shop and a vast, overflowing junkyard that seemed to stretch to the horizon. Most of the hundreds of identical rust-streaked metal roll-up doors looked as if they hadn't been open in years, their secrets slowly decaying within. Reyes, his face a mask of grim determination, showed the recovered key card to the sallow-faced elderly man, who presided with an air of profound boredom and general disinterest over the facility's small, cluttered office. "Unit 207, the old man said, squinting at the card through thick smudged glasses, his voice a nicotine-stained rasp. "Yeah, that's one of ours. Rented out to a fella named Alex Duran. Pays his bill on time, always in cash, month to month. Keeps to himself mostly. Doesn't come around too often, maybe once, twice a month, usually late at night." He shrugged. "Anybody else have authorized access to that unit?" Reyes asked, keeping his voice casual. "Not that I've ever seen, officer. Not on the official paperwork, anyway. Want me to open it up for you? Got a master key somewhere around here if I can find it." Reyes shook his head. "No thanks. We got it." Back with Torres and Nina, who had been discreetly observing the storage facility from their unmarked car, Reyes quickly briefed them. "Unit 207, rented to an Alex Duran, paid in cash, no questions asked. No ID required for access, apparently. And most conveniently for our unsubbed, no security cameras inside the actual storage corridors. Could be another dump site." Nina muttered, her voice tight with apprehension, as she checked the battery on her camera. "Or it could be a hell of a lot worse." Shadow, who had waited patiently in the back of Reyes' squad car, now paced with a restless, anxious energy by the main entrance to the storage facility's dimly lit interior corridors, his paws occasionally scratching at the grimy concrete, as if he knew with a dreadful certainty what lay beyond those anonymous metal doors, as if this was the place he had been trying to lead them to all along. Inside the long, echoing, dimly lit access hallway, Unit 207 was located at the far shadowy end. The air here was stale, stagnant, heavy with the smell of dust, mildew, and something else, something faintly, unpleasantly metallic. Torres, his hand now resting comfortingly on his own service weapon, drew it slowly, silently. Reyes inserted the recovered key card into the electronic lock. There was a soft click, a green light blinked, and the heavy corrugated metal door rattled up on its squeaky, protesting tracks. It looked like a random collection of worthless junk at first glance. Stacks of old water-stained cardboard boxes, broken pieces of cheap furniture draped with dusty sheets, a general air of neglect and forgotten lives. But Shadow, who had pushed past them into the unit, went straight without hesitation for the dark back corner, where a large, heavy tarpaulin was draped conspicuously over several large, oddly shaped crates. "Clear it," Reyes ordered, his voice a low growl. Torres, his gun still raised, cautiously pulled back the heavy tarp. Underneath, revealed in the stark, unforgiving beam of Reyes' flashlight, were 3 large industrial-grade insulated coolers, the kind used by fishermen or hunters. There was no power supply to them, no ice. They were simply there. Nana, her breath catching in her throat, reached out a trembling hand and slowly, reluctantly opened the lid of the first cooler. The smell, the god-awful, unforgettable smell, was instantaneous, overwhelming a physical assault. She turned away, choking back a sob, gagging, as Reyes, his face a mask of stone, lifted the heavy lid fully. Inside, neatly, almost clinically arranged, were more body parts, each wrapped carefully, meticulously in clear plastic, some vacuum-sealed. Human remains. "Oh, dear God in heaven!" Torres whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes wide with a horrified, almost uncomprehending disbelief. Kayla Dempsey. She wasn't the first one. He's done this before. Many times." The second cooler yielded the same gruesome, nightmarish contents, more bones, more neatly packaged flesh, a single pathetically small, brightly colored child's training shoe. The third and largest cooler, however, held something different, something even more chilling if that were possible. It was filled with personal items, wallets, driver's licenses, credit card, cheap costume jewelry, family photographs, small, intimate mementos, trophies. Kayla Dempsey's blood-stained driver's license sat right on top of the sickening pile, her smiling, unsuspecting face a ghostly accusation from beyond the grave. Nana's hands shook so violently, she could barely hold her camera steady as she photographed everything. Her face pale, her eyes filled with tears of rage and despair. Serial killer. She breathed the words like shards of ice in the cold, dead air of the storage unit. We've got a goddamn serial killer. Shadow, who had remained preternaturally calm throughout the gruesome discovery of the coolers, suddenly growled a low, menacing, guttural sound. But he wasn't looking at the coolers, at the human remains. He was staring with an intense, focused fixity at the far blank concrete wall of the storage unit. Reyes turned his powerful flashlight beam in that direction, his heart pounding, and froze. Taped haphazardly to the grimy concrete wall, arranged in neat, almost obsessive grids, were dozens, perhaps hundreds of photographs. Photographs of women. Women of all ages, all races, all types. Some were clearly surveillance shots, distant, grainy, unaware. Others were more formal posed, smiling, oblivious. Some chillingly had been brutally crossed out with thick, angry strokes of red marker. Names, Torres said, his voice choked with disgust, pointing to small, neatly handwritten labels beneath each face. He categorized them like bloody insects. A large, unopened cardboard box sat on the floor at the base of this horrific, silent gallery of victims. Reyes, his movements stiff, almost robotic, popped it open. Inside, nestled amongst more photographs and newspaper clippings, were several thick, spiral-bound notebooks, journals, handwritten logs meticulously, dispassionately detailing the stalking, abduction, torture, and murder of each victim. Dates, times, locations, methods. Cold, methodical, practiced, utterly devoid of any human emotion, any remorse. This isn't just about killing, Reyes said quietly, his voice hoarse, a profound, soul-deep weariness settling over him. He's been perfecting his technique, refining his craft, for years. Chief Monroe's voice, tinny and urgent, crackled through Reyes's radio. Reyes, status report. Now. We found it, Chief. Reyes answered, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. We found his goddamn trophy room. Dump site trophies, detailed handwritten records, everything. We have a prolific, active serial offender. And Shadow led us right to his bloody doorstep. A long, charged silence on the other end of the radio. Then Monroe's voice, strained but resolute. Copy that, Reyes. Seal it off. Nobody in or out. CSU is en route, full team. Do not, I repeat, do not leave that scene until they arrive. Reyes looked at Shadow, who sat perfectly unnervingly still in the center of the horrific, tomb-like storage unit, his amber eyes fixed on that terrible wall of silent, smiling faces. He wasn't moving, wasn't growling, wasn't making a sound. He was just staring with a profound, heartbreaking intensity, as if he understood with a clarity that transcended human comprehension exactly what they had found, exactly what horrors that room contained. As if this monument to unimaginable evil was what he had been trying to show them, to lead them to all along. They sealed the horrific storage locker with wide swathes of official crime scene tape, its lurid yellow lines crisscrossing the metal door like crude, inadequate stitches attempting to close a gaping, mortal wound. By the time the exhausted, grim-faced CSU team arrived clad in their sterile white hazmat suits, their faces obscured by respirators the sun had long since set, casting long, eerie shadows across the deserted, godforsaken landscape of capital city lockers. Reyes leaned heavily against the dented fender of his squad car, staring at nothing in particular. The horrifying images from inside Unit 207 seared permanently onto his retinas. Shadow sat patiently, silently beside him, his warm, solid presence, a strange, unexpected comfort in the cold, encroaching darkness. He was alert but calm, watching everything, missing nothing. Torres, looking utterly drained, his usual youthful exuberance completely extinguished, came over and slumped down beside Reyes on the cracked asphalt. Forensics has made a preliminary count, Mike. 7 confirmed sets of remains in those coolers, 3 still unidentified. Those goddamn journals, they go back at least 6 years. 6 years of this butchery. 6 years! Reyes repeated the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. And nobody bloody caught him. Nobody even knew he existed. He moved around a lot according to the journals. Torres continued, his voice flat weary. Changed names, changed cities. This locker, this whole setup, it was probably just his latest operational base, his latest hunting ground. A young CSU technician, his face pale and drawn beneath his protective mask, brought over a small clear plastic evidence bag. Inside, nestled on a piece of sterile gauze, was a crumpled hardware store receipt dated just 2 days prior to Shadow's arrival at the precinct. Found this in a trash can near the entrance to the unit. Sergeant, the text said, his voice muffled. Receipt for zip ties, heavy-duty bleached disposable gloves, and 3 rolls of industrial-strength duct tape. He was still active, still stocking up, probably getting ready for another one. Shikun Reyes felt a sudden visceral chill despite the cloying warmth of the late autumn night. If Shadow hadn't brought that bag, that hand into the station when he did, we wouldn't be here, Torres finished quietly, his gaze drifting towards the silent, enigmatic dog. God only knows how many more would have ended up on that wall. Back at the brightly lit, humming District 6 station, which now felt like a sanctuary. From the darkness they had just confronted, Chief Monroe sat in stunned, somber silence as Reyes, Torres, and Nena methodically, exhaustively briefed him on the full, horrifying extent of their discoveries at Capital City lockers. The severed hand that Shadow had so bravely, so inexplicably brought to them was now officially forensically confirmed as belonging to Kayla Dempsey. The rest of her dismembered remains had been found as they feared in those terrible insulated coolers. She was, it appeared, the killer's most recent victim, murdered according to the preliminary ME's report, perhaps less than 48 hours before the dog had initiated his desperate, courageous mission. There's almost no discernible digital trail for this Alex Duran alias. Nena added, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she cross-referenced data from the recovered journals with various law enforcement databases. He operated entirely in cash-used burner phones that he discarded regularly, had no traceable social media presence, no credit history under that name. A ghost. Without that dog, without those journals. The room went quiet again, the unspoken implications hanging heavy in the air. Monroe finally spoke, his voice, hoarse heavy, with the weight of their discovery. What do we know? What can we find about this Alex Duran? There has to be something, somewhere. His real name, according to a partial print match from an old arrest record found in one of the journals, is Ellis Thompson Calloway, Reyes said, reading from his own hastily scribbled notes. He has a prior manslaughter conviction dating back to 1998. A bar fight that went tragically, fatally wrong. He served 6 years in a state penitentiary up north. Legally changed his name to Alex Duran immediately after his parole. Been ostensibly clean off the official radar ever since. Monroe exhaled a long, shuddering breath. And nobody thought to check to dig deeper because he paid his storage unit bill on time in cash and kept his bloody head down. A model tenant. Afar, the quiet ones, they're always the bloody worst, Reyes said, his voice grim. Security footage from the exterior cameras at the Capital City lockers facility, though, grainy and often obscured, showed Alex Duran, Ellis Calloway, visiting his unit approximately once a week, usually late at night or in the very early hours of the morning. He always wore gloves, always carried a nondescript duffel bag, never stayed for long, never spoke to anyone. A creature of habit, of meticulous, deadly routine. Then they found it. New enhanced surveillance footage pulled from a traffic camera located near a derelict strip mall, 2 blocks from the abandoned bakery, timed and dated 2 nights before Shadow's dramatic arrival at the precinct. The footage clearly showed Calloway parking a battered, anonymous white utility van behind the strip mall in the deep shadows. He got out carrying a large, heavy black plastic trash bag and walked purposefully towards the row of commercial dumpsters. The same dumpsters Shadow had led them to, the ones where Kayla Dempsey's remains had been found. Reyes leaned closer to the monitor, his breath catching in his throat. He rewound the footage frame by painstaking frame, watching again, his eyes straining. And there at the very edge of the grainy, poorly lit frame, almost invisible in the deep flickering shadows cast by a faulty streetlight, was a small, hunched, indistinct shape. A dog, watching Calloway, observing his every move. "He was there," Reyes said quietly, his voice filled with a sudden, profound, almost chilling understanding. Shadow was there that night. He saw it happen. He saw Calloway dump those bags. Shadow had been the only witness to Kayla Dempsey's final, ignominious disposal. And he had remembered. And he had acted. The next morning, Reyes found Chief Monroe, a man not known for sentimental gestures, crouched awkwardly beside Shadow's new makeshift bed in the converted corner of the station's rarely used vehicle maintenance bay. The chief was gently, almost hesitantly, stroking the dog's matted fur. "He's not just Lucky Reyes," Monroe said softly without looking up, his voice filled with a newfound grudging respect. "There's something else going on with this one." "No, Chief." Reyes agreed, his own heart filled with a strange, powerful mix of awe and affection for this extraordinary, enigmatic creature. He didn't just stumble upon that hand. He knew. He tried to tell us in the only way he knew how. He risked everything to drag that evidence into a building full of strangers, full of potential threats. He got yelled at, threatened, nearly shot, almost thrown out on his ear. But he didn't quit. He wouldn't leave until we listened. Monroe stood slowly, his knees cracking in protest. I've put in an official request for a full behavioral and aptitude evaluation with the departmental K-9 training unit. If he passes, and God knows after what he's done, I suspect he will, we start him on official K-9 training protocols immediately. Reyes looked at the dog, the stray, the hero, the creature who had, against all conceivable odds, changed everything. "With all due respect, Chief," he said, a faint smile touching his lips, "I think he's already one of us. He's been one of us since he walked through that door." As if on cue, Shadow stood stretched languidly, and then, with a quiet, confident dignity, walked over to Reyes's parked squad car. He paused for a moment at the rear passenger door, then with a surprising agility jumped gracefully into the back seat, settling himself comfortably on the worn vinyl, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before, as if he belonged there. He had, it seemed, officially claimed his spot. District 6, it appeared, had a new, albeit highly unconventional K-9 unit. 3 weeks later, the initial sensational headlines about Kayla Dempsey's brutal murder had exploded with almost hysterical media fervor into something far bigger, far more terrifying. "Stray dogs grisly find. Unmasks prolific serial killer," screamed one tabloid. "Shadow the hero cop nobody expected," proclaimed another. Ellis Thompson, Calloway. The quiet, unassuming man who paid his storage unit bill in cash sat in a maximum security jail cell denied bail, his face a blank, emotionless mask on the nightly news. The evidence against him, thanks largely to Shadow's incredible intervention, was overwhelming, irrefutable DNA matches from multiple crime scenes, the horrific contents of his trophy locker, the damning, meticulous handwritten journals, the grainy surveillance footage. The district attorney's office was already building ironclad cases for at least 7 confirmed homicides, with the grim expectation of more to come as the investigation widened, as more cold cases were re-examined in light of Calloway's detailed confessions. But at the District 6 precinct, after the initial media storm had subsided, life, or something resembling it, slowly, gradually began to return to a semblance of its former mundane rhythm. The vehicle maintenance bay in the station's grimy basement had been unofficially but permanently converted. Shadow's comfortable orthopedic bed, a donation from a grateful local pet supply store, now occupied pride of place alongside a set of gleaming new stainless steel food and water bowls. And on the wall above his bed, a simple hand-painted wooden plaque had appeared overnight, courtesy of Nina and a few of the other officers. Canine Shadow, he found us first. Shadow, to no one's real surprise, aced every single one of the K9 unit's rigorous evaluation tests: obedience tracking, scent, discrimination, aggression, control handler, protection, courage under pressure. He performed flawlessly with an intelligence and focus that astounded even the most experienced cynical police dog trainers. Reyes, after a crash course in K9 handling protocols, was officially proudly designated as his permanent handler. The department's newest, most celebrated, and certainly most unconventional K9 member had indeed come from the unforgiving, brutal streets, not from a prestigious European breeder or a specialized military training program. Torres, who had initially been deeply skeptical, now often watched Shadow work a complex scent discrimination grid in the precinct's training yard, with an expression of open, undisguised admiration. "I still can't quite believe it, Mike," he said one crisp autumn morning, shaking his head in wonder. He's better, more intuitive than most of the highly pedigreed, expensive dogs we've actually paid a fortune for over the years." Reyes smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes these days. "He didn't come from a world of comfort and privilege, Maria," he said, his voice soft. "He came from a world of pure survival. And maybe that's what makes him different, special, and saving us from ourselves more like," Torres added quietly, his gaze respectful as he looked at the dog. Reyes knelt as Shadow, having successfully completed the complex training drill, returned to him with the correct marked evidence sample held gently, expertly in his mouth, his plumed tail offering a single satisfied wag. "You knew, didn't you, partner?" Reyes said quietly, his voice filled with a profound, enduring wonder as he took the sample from the dog. "You knew that bag, that hand mattered. You knew we needed to see it. You knew where it would lead us." Shadow didn't answer, of course. He just sat there patiently, his intelligent amber eyes steady and calm, his gaze fixed for a long, silent moment on the gleaming silver police badge pinned to Reyes's chest. Maybe it was just the way the bright morning light was catching the polished metal, Reyes thought. Or maybe it was something more. Something much, much more.